All right, let's get to tariffs. A dizzying day yesterday in Washington as the news rolled in. Are the tariffs on? Are they off? What's happening? Let's go ahead and put this up there on the screen. Trump's Truth Social. I just spoke with President Claudia Sheinbaum of Mexico. It was a friendly conversation. She agreed to immediately supply 10,000 Mexican soldiers on the border, separating Mexico and the United States. These soldiers will be specifically designated to stop the flow of fentanyl and illegal migrants into our country. We further agreed to immediately pause the anticipated tariffs for a 1-month period during which we'll have negotiations headed by Secretary of State Marco Rubio. I look forward to participating in those negotiations. Mexico confirmed this news. Claudia Sheinbaum, let's go ahead and put that on the screen, actually broke the news first. Justin Trudeau similarly said, I just had a good call with President Trump. Canada is implementing our $1.3 billion border plan, reinforcing the border with new choppers, technology, and personnel, enhanced coordination. Nearly 10,000 frontline soldiers or personnel are and will be working on protecting the border. In addition, Canada is making commitments to appoint a fentanyl czar. We will list cartels as terrorists, ensure 24/7 eyes on the border, launch a Canada-U.S. joint strike force to combat organized crime, fentanyl, and money laundering. I have also signed a new intelligence directive that we will be backing with $200 million. Proposed tariffs will be paused for at least 30 days while we work together. So there's
Everyone knows. Once you appoint a czar,
yes,
the problem
is
right. basically
You're on.
Done. Over.
It's
history.
a big question as to what happened here, whether this was the plan all along. Many people are pointing out the fact that much of this actually existed already. So, for example, put B3 up on the screen. Joe Biden, under the Biden administration, Mexico had apparently sent some 15,000 troops to the border. It's unclear whether there's going to be an additional 10,000 here, bringing the total to 25,000. Similarly, in Canada, it appeared that some of these initiatives are already on the books on January 13th before Trump even took office. So I don't know. I mean, whether this is symbolic or not in terms of the Trump demands, I mean, the fundamental difference, I guess, comes down to both the leverage, the power used, and the interim 30-day period, as in, well, if we don't like the results, then we're going to change things. So fundamentally, that's what I would say the overall difference is. But the tariffs are off for now for the next 30 days. S&P 500, as of this morning, let's see, it is up by 0.14%, even with the China tariffs. So
yeah.
The markets were they were a little royal. They actually didn't expect as bad. They didn't react as badly as I thought.
I think they kind of assumed this is what was
I was going to say, so what if there is the rational market hypothesis that they were correct, that the tariffs itself were never going to happen? Maybe we should reconsider that, right?
I mean, I'm just, I guess, still a little confused about what these tariffs are supposed to be about in the first place, because the way I understood it, and the way you, I think, accurately explained it yesterday, is like, well, they're really about economics, but you have to put this bullshit layer of it's about fentanyl on top, even though like no fentanyl comes from Canada. Basically, it's a very small percentage, right? 1%. But then all the quote unquote concessions, even if we grant that they're concessions, are about fentanyl. They're not about economics. And Trump previously had been saying, you know, the only way Canada can fly is if they become the 51st state, or if our trade deficit becomes zero and is balanced out. But then, you know, what he gets in exchange for this is, oh, we're going to appoint a fentanyl czar and keep the troops on the border that are already there. So, you know, we're about to talk about the popularity of tariffs, which is something that you've been talking about. And I actually think that a tariff regime could be popular, even if it did require, you know, some pain, as Trump floated, that there would be as a result of these things. But just as, you know, we're about to talk to Matt Stoller about this. We already recorded the conversation. That's why I'm previewing this. But, you know, just as Biden failed to enlist people in the, like, antitrust project and the, you know, National Labor Relations Board and the CFPB, there has to be a story that people understand of why they're sacrificing, why they're experiencing this pain. And right now, there is no real, it's all over the place. It makes no sense. Why Canada? Why are you putting higher tariffs in theory on Canada than you are on China? Like, what has Canada done wrong? So, you know, I think that's part of the thing here is, if you want to make this about bringing back American manufacturing jobs, reindustrializing the industrial Midwest, I think there's a chance that you could enlist the American people in that project. But number one, I don't think that most of these tariffs accomplish that goal. And number two, I think the story about them is deeply confused, contradictory.
Tariffs are a tool. I mean, look, in principle, I'm like, great, 25,000 more troops at the border, great. Having leverage over our allies to Canada and Mexico, very questionable. But it's one of those where, like you said, look, I believe in the story. I believe in the tariffs. I believe in bringing back a lot of this manufacturing. And so if this is all it takes in order to basically get you to call them off, I don't know. I mean, is it going to be a fundamental difference? Maybe. I guess it's an open question as to that. I think the reason I was excited about them, the reason I like the idea of even threatening is I fundamentally believe in using American assistance, power, and the economy to achieve ends that are good for our people. Now, the American people have voted for Donald J. Trump on a message of immigration, threatening the Mexican economy, which is 80% exports to the United States if they don't help us out more on that, is in principle a thing I think is fantastic. I think it's good to be able to get them to either send troops there and to have a 1 month cliff falling over their head where it's like, hey guys, the guillotine's gonna fall if you don't get your act together. All I totally support. But the problem is that with this, the way that it currently is, it runs the risk of what you were saying, of not falling into this broader national project. Now, the China tariffs, for example, luckily, at least in my opinion, have gone into place. And I hope, and we're about to talk, as you said, with Stoller about the de minimis exception and more of which I truly am praying and hoping that they close it just because of the impact it's had on our overall economy. But when there lacks explanation, when there lacks coherent vision, that's when you risk blowback. And in the event that these tariffs ever do go into power, we perhaps could see that. So we had, do you want to speak for Harry Enton?
One more thing, and then we'll get Harry Enton. There is also a risk here that I think we already see playing out. And maybe, honestly, from my ideological perspective, it's kind of a silver lining. But because all of this, I'm going to threaten Colombia, I'm going to threaten Mexico, I'm going to threaten Canada for some reason, because this is all being done. And even after, Canada had already announced this $1.3 billion package and enforced in anticipation of Trump coming in to try to please him in advance. Mexico had done a very similar thing with Claudia Sheinbaum, massively increasing the number of raids. The amount of fentanyl that was being seized at the border dropped to some of the lowest levels in years. So they felt like, okay, we're doing the things he wants us to do. And still they end up in this situation of, being bullied and threatened and, shoved into crisis and all of this sort of stuff. So you already see European leaders talking to the Financial Times, for example, saying, we no longer see really China as the greatest risk to us. We actually think that it's these guys over here. And maybe we need to form a sort of anti-American alliance because individually we have no chance. And Trump is floating tariffs against the EU, as you know, as well.
Which I hope they go into place.
And so that's the other piece is you are sort of forcing the world's hand, accelerating a shift that was already happening. Now, from my perspective, that may not be the worst thing in the world. But if you're interested in American power and empire, this is definitely counter to, to that particular political project.
I actually don't agree. I'll tell you why. Mexico, what are you going to do? 80% of your economy or exports rely on us. You ain't going nowhere, okay? Who are you going to sell to? Canada, geography matters. 74% of your exports come into the United States. They were floating, maybe we should join the European Union. Yeah, good luck. Same thing in terms of the Europeans. Maybe we'll rely on China. China's going to give you their nuclear umbrella and they're going to protect you from all of your problems so that you guys can have universal health care, but you don't actually defend yourselves in these giant social welfare states. So let's get real, too, about how long. It's taken 75 years of integration for the European Union and for the European economies in the United States. It's taken 200 years now of Canada and Mexico. They are going nowhere. Maybe Africa, India, China, South Korea, Japan, those are the countries I would worry much more about. But these people, nothing. I mean, no matter what, they will be heavily reliant. They're effectively client states. I mean, that's what it is. The problem is that they don't like that. I mean, I like reminding them of some of that, especially whenever it comes to the border. And the border alone is certainly justification for hitting them with tariffs or threatening tariffs if we want to. I would like, though, to see a return to some of what we talked about previously yesterday about manufacturing and about the fact that NAFTA itself had decimated a huge part of our manufacturing sector. The way that these automakers currently operate, where a single part will cross like 40 or 50 times the Canadian, the Mexican border. It'll cross 3 separate borders like multiple times before it ever even makes its way into a car. And then, it's called American made. There's still a lot of deficits in the USMCA. So I had thought it was an opening on USMCA, and I mean, I guess it certainly could be in terms of setting the ground for what that looks like. But for right now, seems to be wrapped up.
Yeah.
I don't really know what else to say.
Yeah.
So,
well, and we'll see what happens a month from now when we go back to this, when we see this rodeo play on again. By the way, I should mention there were people floating also that, I mean, you got a bunch of billionaire, like, I mean, the Treasury Secretary is a billionaire hedge fund guy, George Soros buddy, and wondering if there is also some profiting going on over these manufactured market drops and recoveries. Something.
Oh, you're talking about the Soros finance, like a Forex trade. That's actually pretty interesting. I wonder if anybody,
people,
if people flag any trades, because these are all public.
Right. If you're the Treasury Secretary and you know what Trump's basic plan is here, well, you're in a position to profit off that knowledge.
Well, it wouldn't even be him per se, but at this point with all the guidelines or whatever, but maybe people who used to work for him.
If we keep going through this cycle, it may be something to keep in mind for the future.
Well, here's the problem. You're going to encourage a bunch of retail traders to start doing Forex and trying to recreate the shorting of the British.
I am not encouraging anyone to do anything.
So be careful.
I'm just telling you what others are floating online and something to keep an eye on.
You might be encouraging me, to be honest. I'm like, well, maybe there's some money to be made here, you know? Start making some phone calls. No, I'm not going to go to prison.
All right, let's get to Harry Ensign, who broke down some of the polling about how people actually feel about tariffs. Let's take a listen.
Trump's tariffs on Canada, China, Mexico. Look at this. Just 38% support. You don't have to be a mathematical genius to figure out that 51% oppose is larger than the 38% support. Look, Trump has done some fairly popular things in his first few weeks in office. This is not one of them. No, no, no. Horrible, 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 to quote Charles Barkley. The American folks are opposed to these tariffs when you ask it specifically like this about the three countries, or if you ask it more vaguely about tariffs overall, they simply put, do not like it, Mr.
It's interesting. Even with China in the question,
Correct.
People say that they are opposed to tariffs. The majority here, and there's not a majority on a lot of things these days.
The two big focuses for Trump in the polling are immigration and the economy. Tariffs ain't it, my dear friend. Tariffs ain't it. Trump should focus on tariffs. In November of 2024, when Ipsos asked it was 1%. Look at what happened in December of 2024. It doubled. It doubled, but to only 2%. When you double to only 2%, you know that the American people don't want Trump's focus to be here. They don't like it. They don't want his focus to be there. They want it to be on other issues. You know, Trump has done a lot of things that are unpopular in the past, but the poll numbers haven't moved. That may be the case here, but I'm a little skeptical of that. Why? Take a look at weekly Google searches for tariffs. Look how much higher they are versus a year ago. They're up 2,400%. That reaches a 21-year high. You know folks are paying attention when there are more Google searches for that than for Taylor Swift, who almost always is in the top of Google search.
So we caught people's attention, but not necessarily in a good way.
Yeah, okay. We'll see.
What do you make of that? Just going back to what I was saying before, I just looked it up. The original China tariffs that he put on in his first administration were initially somewhat underwater, and they became more popular.
Absolutely.
And they became majority, in favor, which is why also you see then Democrats adopted a similar position. Biden continues that and does industrial policy. And I think it fits with what we were saying. Like, people understand, okay, a lot of our jobs, a lot of these industrial factory towns, a lot of the jobs left and are now in China. And so it was a very easily comprehensible story around this is why we're doing this. Now, you can still disagree with them. I don't think they didn't do much in terms of accomplishing their goal of reshoring. They needed to be paired with industrial policy. There were issues there, but people understood the story of what it was about. And I think we're even willing to, have a more expensive washing machine or whatever.
Well, not only that, all of the doom and gloom was fake. We had hundreds of billions of dollars in tariffs. I think the S&P 500 was up by like 25%.
Yeah.
So
now they did have to basically bail out the farmers because of the retaliatory tariffs. So it's not like there was no impact, but
What's
the federal government addressed the problem.
Right, exactly.
But it is interesting to me that there does seem to be some, there's almost like a nuanced view of tariffs among the American public where, when it was China and we understood this, okay, we could go along with that. But when you're talking about Canada, Mexico, and this doesn't make any sense, and why are they being tariffed more than China, and it's just across the board, and why should avocados have a tariff? Then, you're not going to have people lining up to pay more at the grocery store, more for their cars or whatever.
There you go. Well, we'll see how it all comes into practice. For the next 30 days, we all have a stay. Hey, if you like that video, hit the like button or leave a comment below. It really helps get the show to more people.
And if you'd like to get the full show ad-free, and in your inbox every morning. You can sign up at breakingpoints.com.
That's right. Get the full show, help support the future of independent media at breakingpoints.com.